Okay, so today we'll be talking about The King is Watching. I have practiced on the game during the demo and have played quite a bit during the release as well, and I am ready to provide you with some tips and tricks that you may not know. Now, do keep in mind that the ones I will be providing are sort of aimed at newer players / players who have just a little bit of experience, right? Because as you progress through the game, you will see yourself fighting out various different strategies, right? But at first, I know that it can be quite confusing when it comes to this game, right? And I want to give you a little bit of a brief rundown of some tips and tricks that I have prepared, which will hopefully elevate your game to the next level, right? Because I know that once I've started doing these things myself, my runs have improved significantly, right? So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. And by the way, if you just want to skip towards various different tips, I will leave the timestamps in the description, so you can just skip to each one if you feel like you know one of the tips that I'm mentioning, right? Okay, so let's go. And do keep in mind that while recording this video, I will be showcasing these examples both from a live game as well as from a pre-recorded game, right? Just to showcase the point a little bit easier. And the first tip that I have for when you start the game is to always switch one option, right? This is gonna be probably one of the biggest game changers in how you manage the enemies and how you manage the waves, and that is switching the spawn troops on the battlefield to spawn troops in the barracks. What this does is, if we quickly build up a little bit of a starting point, right? Now, as you can see, once you make your troops, usually if you do have this option, basically spawn troops on the battlefield enabled, what will happen is as you train your troops, they will instantly join the fight, right? The reason why you don't want to do this is in a lot of cases, especially early on, you'll notice that the troops that you do get will be quite low tier, right? It will be peasants, it will be somewhat low HP enemies, not enemies, but I mean your troops, right? And you want to avoid launching them one by one, because if you look at the waves, right, they quickly can stack up to be relatively difficult, right? Now, wall busters aren't exactly difficult because they don't really do damage to your troops. For example, goblin swordsman, right? If I just keep training my troops and the enemy wave comes out with 2 goblin swordsmen, if I just train these one by one on even like 2 at a time, they will keep leaving 2 at a time, and honestly, they are gonna instantly lose to these swordsmen. The reason why you want to leave troops on the barracks is because as you train them, you will be able to launch them all at once, right? As you can see, as the game goes, right, I have made 2 troops in here. Of course, I'm just showcasing at the very early game. Once you build up more of these buildings, you will notice that the amount of troops that you can launch will be significantly higher. And as a group, they will be able to, first of all, sustain much longer against a same amount of enemies, as well as they will be able to do more damage in a quick burst as if they were launched one by one, right? And once you use the barracks, right, you can quickly do quick replenishment, and you'll see that both of the troops will come out at once, right? And this, of course, applies to all troops, right? But yeah, this is probably the first thing and probably one of the most important game-changing things that you should make as you start the game. Okay, and another point I wanted to mention is very closely tied to the option of launching all of your troops at once. And in situations like this, where you see that, for example, you are clearly gonna be losing the fight, right? Because the enemies have way more troops. Their troops are gonna be way stronger than 13 of my peasants, right? And if you see in this fight, you'll notice that while I wipe out a few of their troops, they will completely delete my team, right? And what I do next is I switch to full building production, or I mean troop production, right? The amount of production that you do doesn't really matter, right? What matters is when you launch the troops, right? And what you want to be doing is you wait for the troops, for the enemy troops to start hitting the castle, right? You do not want to be launching your troops before they hit the castle if the enemy wave is much stronger than what you can provide. Because if I launched my troops somewhere around here when they were close to killing my... Or rather, yeah, when they're close to starting to hit my castle, if I just launched the 4 troops plus the 3 troops for my king that I have right now, pretty much the same scenario that happened before will happen. I will probably kill maybe 3 or 4 of these, but because the enemies are significantly stronger than whatever I have right now, they will instantly get wiped, and then it will take forever for me to build up even more troops, and my castle will take a bunch of damage. However, there's one little cool trick, and that is once the enemies start hitting the castle, and as you can see, I wait for all of the enemies to start hitting the castle. Yes, our castle will lose a little bit of HP. However, what you notice now is once I launch all of my troops, and I have 10 of them, as they focus the castle, they will not be killing your troops, right? The only exception is ranged enemies, right? They sometimes focus on the castle and sometimes focus on your troops, right? But in majority of the cases, especially against melee troops, right? Does not include bosses, of course, but it does work in bosses in most scenarios as well. You will be able to freely do damage, especially with high damage troops. And for your information, peasants, for their price, are actually very, very high damage troops, and they will be easily able to wipe out the enemy wave, even if it is much stronger than what you can use yourself. Okay, and the third point that sort of again ties into the first two, right? Like 3 of these sort of interact really well with each other, and that would be to use your castle HP as just another resource, right? Depending on the upgrades you have, depending on the king you use, your castle will have various amounts of HP. I believe the lowest will be 100, but you can get up to like 200 plus with various rings and various upgrades, right? But what you want to keep in mind, especially when you are choosing the waves that will be coming at you, right? To just use the castle HP as just another resource, right? Because here's the deal. Even if you lose HP, first of all, right? Once it comes to later game, in a lot of cases, you do have to kill the enemies before they reach your castle. So whatever HP that you did lose in the beginning will not be that big of a deal. Plus, there are also various different ways to regen the castle HP, whether that's spells, artifacts, buildings, all of that, right? There's various different ways to regen your castle HP, which you can easily do later on once you progress through the game. But especially when it comes to early game, using your castle HP will be a very, very big advantage to you, right? So for example, when combining this wave, right, I put an easier wave 1. Honestly, I feel like it would have been a little bit difficult here. But for wave 2, if you notice, I put 8 wall breakers into the wave. The reason for that is, first of all, I know that they will not be attacking my troops. So whatever I have saved up, I will be able to hit them. But here's the cool thing. I know that my troops will not die, and I will be able to prep them for wave 3, because even if these units do pass through my troops, right? Which I can showcase you right here, right? As you can see, 8 of these, I believe they're called wall breakers, are coming through, right? My peasants will start doing damage to them. Honestly, it really doesn't matter whether they kill them or not, right? Because as I know, for the amount of the wars that I will be getting from having these 3 waves, right, the damage on my castle will not be significant, right? As you can see, there's still 5 of them left. They place their bombs, they all die. And if you notice, I got 3 different waves beat. I didn't lose any troops, and my castle only took 24 damage, right? This also applies to when you launch your troops as they start hitting your castle, right? Even if they do attack your troops. Just use your castle HP as just a resource, because first of all, in a lot of cases, you will not need that HP later on, because the amount of waves that you do receive on your castle will be so significant that that little 10 or 20 HP that you lost will not matter at all and will be lost in a matter of seconds. But for early game, that is a method to save a lot of your troops and get a lot of the higher rewards, especially for the first or maybe 1 or 2 wave choices that you get. Okay, and another tip I want to give for a little bit more of an early game progression, and that is to always play around your building cooldowns and specifically wells. What I want to say by that is, in this game there are 3 types of buildings. There are buildings that are essentially free, and if you break them you get them back, for example wells. There are buildings that will cost a certain amount, and that if you break them you will not be getting the building back. And then there are buildings that will cost you something, but if you break them you will be getting the building back, right? Now 2 of 3 of these options will drain some of your resources, right? But wells are the only option where, as you can see, even if you break them, you get them back to your inventory, plus they are always free, right? And what I mean by that is, as you play along and as you farm resources, if you want to use a resource, for example, you needed to farm this and this, you can rotate it like that, right? But it's always easier to use these specific tile seals in order to maximize on the sources that you get, right? Because these are boosted. And what I mean by this is, never ever leave an empty slot, right? If you ever see yourself leaving an empty slot in your vision, here's a very easy thing to do if you don't want to think about it. Place a well, right? As you move them, they do not have any cooldown, as you can see, so they do not go on cooldown as the regular buildings would, right? Plus, even if you just need to use it for like 10 or 20 water or whatever, right, you can instantly later move the building and place something else that you want in there, right? And as you see, once one of the buildings expires, for example, and you see yourself having an empty slot coming up again and you are not sure what to place in there, right, very easy option. Always place a well, right? Always place a well. This is the only building that is free to use, that is free to build, that does not go on cooldown. And water, especially in the release version of the game, is a much more useful resource than it was in the demo. You will not find yourself stacking over 1,000 water ever, and you will constantly need it to place various buildings and even build troops, right? Okay, and the next tip I want to give is a bit more about wave management and especially progress management in a run, right? And in general, what I want you to remember is early/mid game is all about your troops. However, mid game to end game, it's all about spells, right? Of course, there are a few exceptions, right? There are some troops that do better in late game and some troops that do better in early game, right? But in general, the reason why you want to focus on troops early game and then slowly convert your build to spells is very simple, right? Troops, at least majority, like a very big majority of the troops in this game, they will do single target damage, whereas spells, majority of them will do some sort of AoE effects. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the very first wave choice that you can do, right, you'll notice that the troop amounts are super insignificant, right? Like even the difficult options, they will only have like 6 of the basic troops, 4 wall breakers for the highest rewards out there, right? Once you go a little bit towards end game, and what I mean by end game is around like wave 300 to 400, where you're close to beating the further bosses, right? Yeah, for example, this is the enemies that you get to choose around wave 380, right, as you can see. And what I mean by that is, in a lot of cases, yes, the troops will be slightly more difficult, but you will still see that a lot of the troops in here, they are in much higher amounts, plus they are relatively squishy compared to the damage that your spells do. And what I mean by this is, as you move further, right, the troops that you will be able to produce will simply, in a lot of cases, not be able to keep up without significant help from the spells, right? But what spells can do, and because majority of the spells in this game will do some sort of either protection / CC for the rest of your team, or they will just straight up do AoE damage, right? And in a lot of these cases, if you stack a lot of these waves with squishier units and you have a lot of AoE spells, you will be able to wipe these waves in seconds without your troops even reaching the enemy wave, right? And just to give you an example, as you can see, the enemy wave is slowly approaching, right? And look at the enemy counts. They have around 35 troops in total, and what I'll be doing here is I'll simply be using AoE damage spells, and I will be able to wipe majority of the enemies by simply spamming them like this, right? So you can simply build up either a catalog of spells that you currently have, or you can keep collecting them as time goes by and just launching them one by one, right? So I'm stacking a lot of the spells, right? You're not seeing the effect yet because I haven't launched it, but yeah, as you can see, the enemies are dying in pretty high amounts, right? I'm just stacking a lot of various damage spells, and all of these spells, even without any spell damage upgrades, trust me, they do stack up. Look at the wave that are launched at first, right? And look what's left. I think there's like only 30% of the enemies left, and even then I am able to easily debuff all of them, easily protect my troops, right? Trust me, this game, especially late game, will be super difficult with just troops, and you really want to make sure that you are able to use a lot of your spells. Look at this. Spells are so insane that you can easily turn your bosses into sheep and then instantly kill them, right? Like, it's such a big difference. And yeah, what I mean by that is early on, make sure to focus on troops, because even then, the early troop upgrades, the capacity upgrades will be pretty cheap, and you will be able to easily stack like 15 or 20 troops and beat quite a few waves with that. But around wave 150 to maybe 200, I would highly recommend starting to build onto your spells and slowly pivot your game into a spell-based economy. Okay, and on the topic of spells and on the topic on managing the damage that you can do with them, another super important tip that I have to give you is how to make sure that the spells you are producing are coming along efficiently, right? If you notice at the current build that I have the research table for some extra like crystal mines or whatever. I have 2 crystal producing slots, and I have 3 buildings that only produce spells, right? What you may notice is that I have a very high amount of spells, and I always have 1 slot empty. And the reason you always want to have 1 slot empty is if you do fill up all 6 of your spell slots, right? I know some kings and some upgrades will allow you to have a bit more, but the amount of different spells that exist in the game will still fill up your inventory regardless, right? If you have 6 slots already filled, right, your spell producing buildings will stop, right? Why you want to be keeping an empty slot here? Most of the buildings will have an upgrade. Let me actually show you it in game, right? Magic School, Magic College, the last one, whatever it's called, that produces legendary spells, right? They all have the second upgrade. Illusion of Choice no longer generates random spells, but grants spell choices instead. This is one of the most important upgrades for all of these spell buildings, right? And as long as you are playing with spells and you do have this option, this is one of the most important upgrades that you should be grabbing. And the reason for that is, if you look at this run right here, right, all of my spells, As you can see, they are being produced, but I'm not getting them. They are all getting into the queue right here, and as long as you keep one empty spell and don't pick the 6th spell, you can keep producing them. Plus, once you need to start using them, because you can pause this game very, very easily, you will be able to place a spell, right? You pick up the spell, pause the game, place the spell where you want to place it, and you will be able to use up all of the stock that you have saved in order to beat the enemies, right? As you can see, I'm just picking spells one by one. The reason why I'm keeping these will be explained in the second point that I will make, but for now, what I want to mention is make sure to start stacking a lot of the spells, because this will allow your potion, or not potion, like the spell making buildings to continue working as you are fighting and using them along, right? And yeah, as you can see, I have used maybe like 10 to 15 of my stocks. Some of the stock will be buildings, right? But once you're in sort of these like later stages of the fight, the extra buildings you get can easily wait. And yeah, as you can see, I was able to easily beat the wave pretty much without using any of my troops, and by using a bunch of spells that I have saved up, right? So yeah, make sure to not fill up your spell box, and make sure to always leave at least one slot empty so that your buildings can keep producing spells further. And the last tip I wanna give while we're still on the topic of spells is the spell choices that you make, right? If you look at my box at the moment, right, and I'm of course talking when you're moving towards beating the game without digging into the endless mode, right? This is mostly for like beating the actual bosses in order to beat the run. And what you want to be doing is you want to prioritize and divide the spells that you have. You will have two different types of spells, at least that's how I categorize them, right? There will be one type of spells that will be focused on AoE damage, and these spells will be used to wipe significant amount of enemies that have a low HP. So all of these like goblin bandits, wall breakers, even these riders in some cases, right? You can easily wipe all of them by just spamming a few AoE damage spells like this, right? And if you listen to my previous point, the reason of how you stack these spells, this is the reason why I simply take them one by one and start spamming them on the enemies, because whatever the AoE damage spell is, in a lot of cases they will pretty much do the same thing and just do damage, right? The spells that I do stack on my end are gonna be spells that interact with your own troops in some way or another, right? So whether this is a boost to their speed and attack speed, whether this is a boost to their survivability, whether this is a hard CC on the enemy, turning them into sheep, freezing them, pushing them with tornadoes, all of that, right? These are CC spells that you should be saving, right? You should be saving the safety spells, and you should be constantly using AoE damage spells one by one, because whatever the damage is, it doesn't really matter, right? You will be able to use them one by one. But when it comes to bosses, you really want to be prepared with a lot of the spells that, first of all, can CC them easily, and second of all, can enable your troops to do damage. Because when it comes to bosses, they have significant amounts of HP, right? And the amount of HP that they have, you will simply not be able to kill just with damage spells. And just to give you an example, I'm gonna showcase you the last wave of this run, right? And what I do here is, again, I can see that there isn't really a lot of enemies, so what I'll do is I'll wipe the little healer mages that are together with him. But my main focus will be on, first of all, increasing the damage that my troops do, plus having a lot of hard CC effects, which will disable the boss's attacks, right? So what you'll see me doing here is, first of all, I will essentially like hard CC lock the boss so that he's not able to do anything, and I'll try to enable my troops to do a lot of damage. Now, a lot of damage, a lot of bosses will have these HP bars split into several segments, and after each segment they might do like a big AoE attack, they might spawn additional troops or something like that, right? Basically what I want to say by that is they will not take any additional damage until they do that wave. As you can see, I can start hitting the boss with my troops, right? But he will simply not be taking any damage because he's currently in this sort of like down phase where he is producing an attack, right? And once he uses that attack, you are once again able to damage him, and you want to use that time in order to hard CC them, right? For me, what I'm doing here is I'm mostly saved up the spells that will first of all CC the boss. So this includes the stun, this includes the sheep, right? And then I saved the spells that can enhance the survivability of my troops. So this includes the endurance one, where you are essentially preventing your troops from dying. This includes the evasion one, where you are able to prevent your troops from dying a little bit, right? Not 100%, but there is a chance that will help you out, and you want to stack these sort of spells. So in general, you want to make sure that you are stacking AoE damage spells for the waves with low HP enemies, and then you want to be keeping a lot of the spells that either work with your troops, enhancing them or healing them or preventing their death, and then CCing the boss for these endgame boss waves, right? And yeah, that's about it for the various tips and tricks that I wanted to provide for your game, right? Hopefully they help you out. I know some of these you may already know, but this is just what I've learned after playing the demo as well as the release for quite a while, right? And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe if you want to stay tuned for more The King is Watching content. I'll definitely be focusing more on this. I'm having a massive blast with this game. And yeah, that's about it. And peace.